Hey there, and welcome to the Jeffrey Van Dyke Show, a podcast for paradigm changers. Each week I speak with another influential leader who's changing the conversation for their audience, their industry, and this world. I am so glad you're here. Welcome to the show. Hey, well, welcome once again to the Jeffrey Van Dyke Show. We have Keith Mitchell in the house. I'm so glad you're here, man. So Keith is a former all-pro NFL player who turned internationally renowned mindfulness teacher and celebrity yogi, as you do after NFL, of course. He is a holistic health and wellness advocate, a community activist, humanitarian, really committed to providing holistic tools that help others achieve optimal health, harmony, aliveness to the fullest degree. After a life-changing football injury that left Keith partially paralyzed, he utilized yoga and meditation to fully recover, and now shares his work of transformation with others and is a sought-after lifestyle wellness coach, teacher, motivational speaker, among other things. So, Keith, thank you for being here. Glad to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. Don't you love introductions?
So you gotta have them, right? We gotta have them. I want to learn a little bit about this pivotal moment, and then we'll go from there. So you were, you always wanted to be a ball player. You played football in high school. You then got into New Orleans Saints in '97. Played in Houston from 2002 to 2003. Then in Jacksonville from 2003 to 2004, when you had this injury. And in preparing for this, you played a play, you'd played many times, and then, as fate has it, sometimes everything changed. So tell us just about that for a moment.
Well, football was always like a passion for me. I really think it was just the first thing really I was exposed to in a big way. And people said, this is greatness. They looked up to it, they admired it. And when I saw that, and when I could define greatness, I put those two together and said, okay, I want to do that. I want to step into greatness, my greatness. Really, that was the commitment and how it shifted in my mind when one of my teachers proposed a question. They said, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I was probably a freshman in high school, and I was like, I really contemplated that question, and I really committed to answering that question. I think the very interesting thing is when, and through a contemplative practice, when you propose a question, the universe will give you your answer. I think that's a lot of times the reason why we stay away from.
Yeah.
So when I put that out, it's like it began to be my mission. How can I be great? And what is it going to take of me to step into my greatness potential? And so sports was the low-hanging fruit, if you will. And so I committed to doing so. And through my progression of ideas of manifestation, I had as a freshman, not even playing really football at that time, but to say I wanted every school in the country to recruit me to play football for them, to put that staple, as you mentioned earlier, stake in the ground. That was my first stake in the ground. And to accomplish that was such an amazing feat. Now the next thing is, okay, when I accomplish that, what's next? I think that's also the thing that the pressure that we need as humans that keep us into, in my opinion, solving problems, progressing, because there's two ways of living. You're either growing or you're dying. Inevitably, we're dying ultimately, fundamentally. However, but to be here and to be inspired about waking up each day is how do we put ourselves into the planet? How do we put ourselves into the world to ultimately solve our problems? So that began to be my mission. And sports, like I said, was a low-hanging fruit. And I began to be good at it. I worked on my craft and I developed to be this character as an athlete. And it took me all around the world. It took me to places that I feel doors are opening for me in the way that I work now. I mean, it's been a major catalyst for my whole life, and I've had a lot of success. Now, that particular play, like I mentioned earlier, the linebacker position is like the gladiator. It's the alpha position. So we're hitting everyone 100 miles an hour. We're having to defend ourselves against those 300 pounders. We're having to run with those fast receivers. We're all over the place. And on this particular play, I was anticipating the play because Drew Bledsoe was the quarterback. We were playing the Buffalo Bills. I was in Jacksonville at this time, and I had got him when I was in New Orleans. What I mean by got him, I had baited him into throwing me an interception, and I ran it for a touchdown. I think it was a 60-yard touchdown. And so I was anticipating that same play. And on this particular play, I ended up, you know how they say football is a game of inches. I ended up one inch too short, and I ended up just making a tackle. And you know, it was a big collision. But on this particular collision was a little different than, you know, it happened from high school to college and to other previous teams. On this particular play, I ended up on my back and I couldn't move. And that was the basis and the start of where I am now.
I can only imagine laying there. You know, I mean, football, you're used to taking hits and giving them. You're used to ending up on the ground, but you're also used to getting up. You know, I can just imagine being there in that moment, a stadium full of people and not being able to move.
Yeah.
Well, what was that moment like? Like, what was going through your head?
You know, on the flip side of being a gladiator, what I find in particular, I learned that day is that vulnerability was one of the hardest things to really deal with. And for me, in that place, in that time, the first thought that came to my mind was, get me out of here. I don't want to be seen like this. Embarrassing.
This isn't greatness.
This was not greatness for me.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, get me out of here, like cover me up. I don't want to be seen like this. It was like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't it wild that like there you are, you're literally paralyzed. And what the psyche is doing is saying, I'm embarrassed, cover me up, get me out of here, you know, because the identity, like you said, when that teacher asked you, you know, where do you want to be in 5 years or 10 years or whatever it was? And you thought you went to, I want to be great. I want to be looked up to. I want greatness. Right. So like that becomes such a part of the identity. And there you are lying down going, this isn't it. Get me out of here. So I assume you had to be carried out.
Yes.
Yeah. And could you walk? Like, were you totally paralyzed? You know, the greatness was a piece, that identity, but I think I think you were saying that there's another piece as well. Yeah.
Yeah. The second epiphany that I had in that course of being on the field is to know I was in pain, or know I was I know I was in bad shape, but I couldn't feel the pain. And so that was something that, I don't know, it's like a feeling that I don't really, it's hard to even express. It's like my body I knew I was in a situation, but I couldn't feel the situation. Because I couldn't respond. Like I was like, even if you look at the film, they show a piece of it on my head is like trying to nudge up a little bit, but my body is doing nothing. Because that's the initial, like, okay, get up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and my body's not doing anything. So that's like a whole different reality, like to be in my body and it's not responding. It blew me away. So I had two things. So I was embarrassed. You know, my mindset as a gladiator to be vulnerable like that. I was like, cover me up. And then the second, now as I'm grounded into my body, realizing I can't even feel my body.
Yeah.
What is that about? You know?
And for an athlete, especially to not feel their body, that's a thing.
Yeah, for me, it was a serious thing. And but that was the start of the evolution to, I want to say, you know, when again, you made the statement about, you know, when I, as a child, as you kind of diagnosed the comment, you know, I realized greatness to be the athlete. And in that moment of realizing and coming to that sport, I realized that the athlete was the character. And continued, you know, through the process, my growth and development was going to be the human.
From the character to the human.
Yes.
Woof. That's, I mean, talk about the hero's journey right there.
Yeah.
You know, I think so many of us walk around thinking we are the character until we realize we're not. And that is a wake up. That's a tough day,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
I mean, liberating, yes, but oof. So you realize, oh, that's the character. Now I need to be great as a human.
Yes.
Um,
What that look like?
yeah. And I think it sounds like that's what the journey you've been on ever since.
Yeah. Yeah. Because a lot of times, which leads me to the concept, because in my book, I have a book coming out, the Mindfulness Playbook. And in my book, a first chapter is Define Your Words. And even I think Martin Luther King has a speech about greatness and realizing your greatness potential. And a lot of times with the word greatness, what you'll find is a lot of people have fear of this greatness.
Mm-hmm.
When you put this attachment to greatness, it puts you in our minds like as this symbolic concept that people are going to poke at when we fall short of that greatness. But the greatness can look like so many different things. Greatness can look like when I make mistakes, I come back and I apologize. Greatness can look like as I choose to love, I can love great. I can be compassionate great. You know, we kind of go far-fetched. We kind of think of, okay, greatness is I'm this superhero. No, it's the human and the capacity to be whatever you desire to be. So just with that simple commitment to be great and to push yourself in that dimension or that way, it changes the whole perspective of how you live your life. It's a precedent.
I love that you share that because I think there are particular words, greatness being one of them, that my company is called the Courageous Messenger, right? When we think about courageous human, I think our mind conjures up the character, right? The superhero version of it, and then either we are that or we're not, or we're close to it or we're not, or whatever the discrepancy with the character it is. I love what is greatness as a human. How can I love great? How can I, what is my measure of greatness as a human? That's a really different question. Yeah, so good. All right. So you get off the field, and obviously it wasn't like you wake up the next day and you're back at it, right? So what happened? What actually happened there?
So through the process, they wheeled me through off the field into a back examination room that I didn't even know existed. And then I end up in the hospital. My mother and sister, they were at the game. So then they're in the ambulance with me. And I wake up the next morning in a hospital room, not really knowing how I got there. You know, my mother's there with me. And then the doctor comes in and the doctor says, well, we don't know really what's going on with you. We're trying to do tests. We don't know if you'll be able to walk again. We don't know if your nervous system will respond like it used to again. And another thing that really caught my attention is that, you know, when I was a kid and it's really first signing up to play football, they have this description of, okay, you got the helmet, you got shoulder pads, knee pads, and so forth, and that you will be protected.
Uh-huh.
My thought was in looking at certain things, we don't really think with the level of consciousness on top of what we're being told. So even as we're protected, we're still putting ourselves in harm's way to a certain extent.
Yeah.
I began to realize, well, the doctor's supposed to have all the answers. Why doesn't he have the answer for me? You know? And so that began to really weigh in my mind as well. And through that process, again, one of the most amazing situations that could have ever happened to me through the process with the nurse, a particular nurse, and it just didn't happen right away. But this nurse, she came up to me, she talked to me about the conscious breathing. She asked me, do you know what happens when you breathe? Have you ever conceptualized what happens when you breathe? And again, another epiphany, like I never thought about it.
Yeah.
I never proposed a question for what happens when we breathe. And those who teach meditation, like yourself, who meditate and teach some of these things, well, the baseline of consciousness, we start with our breath. So now when we begin to conceptualize what this tool is, now we can use it in a different way. Now we're armed with some kind of arsenal, if you will, to when we're facing adversity, we can bounce back. We can actually process the situation. So now for me, as in a victim state, with the victim mindset, even I couldn't be the victim anymore, because now I had something that I could use to contribute to my own healing. So that put me on a whole nother trajectory.
I'm so glad you shared that about this angel called a nurse.
Yeah.
Because, in preparing for this conversation, I was like, okay, I get the arc of the story. Like, NFL player has injury, becomes yogi, but like, where did, because I was like, were you doing yoga before this? Was there any concept of mindfulness that you were using before this? Sounds like this nurse introduced it to you.
Well, the big thing that I think the biggest takeaway, even going back to how we first started the conversation, is the mindset.
Yeah.
Is the dis-ease happens from the emotional body first. So I think we have to go into that. What is this emotional body? What is this mindset? And how does it preface? Like I said, I wasn't even playing football when I put the proclamation in that I wanted to be great at playing football. Now here I'm at the baseline of this situation, which using my mind to accomplish the things that I accomplished in sports. Now I had a history with that. So now I'm here coming back 360 to deal with another adversity. Well, now I'm preparing my mind for what I'm going to journey through.
Yeah.
And that's something that's, again, we haven't even tapped into that, but what that looks like for humanity when we put our minds to doing something. That's right there.
I want to learn from you about that, because there's so many people that know the right, quote unquote, things to do and don't do them around whatever it is, right? So there's something different that happens, I think, for certain, like, athletes in particular seem to have this this mindset of, all right, now I have the tools, now I'm responsible to use them. So when you said, like, I was laying there in a victim mindset, and once I was armed with this tool set, I couldn't be the victim anymore. So what, like, I'm curious, because you've been teaching yoga for a long time now. You've been in this other world for a while. And I'm curious what you see the differences between when people, like, have the tools and don't use them versus get armed and make a decision. And I don't think it's like, I don't consider it black and white. I think we all do a mixture of them, but I think some people err in one direction more than another. What have you seen around that?
Well, the thing is that it's one thing, it's like, there's a statement that comes to my mind. It's like, you can't liberate someone with words. You can't talk someone into liberation, rather. We have to be the embodiment of it. So, yeah. And what that means to me is I have to go through an experience. I have to take what I'm saying I believe in, and I have to test it. And so with sports, is like, okay, you have an idea that you're good. You have an idea that you belong here with the most elite. Well, then on film, in the game, show me.
Yep.
So, and then as a player, I get to go back and reflect through film study. I can go back and say, okay, well, how did I show up? Did I catch the ball or did I not catch the ball? Look at the film, my biasness, because that's another thing that happens. We're biased to our behavior because we've done it so long. It's been a norm. In some cases, it made us successful. It's given us the illusion or an idea that we have this greatness, this great statue on the planet. Yeah. But the reality is, a reality sets in when we contemplate it. And we realize, I did not catch that ball. I did commit that penalty. I didn't hold my responsibility on the field. And through that, we can realize, okay, how can I do it better? How can I be more efficient? How can I improve? And I think that's the dynamic that's different than, again, just lip service.
Yeah. So that sounds to me, this greatness as a human, the greatness that's a through line for you. And it, we'll get to the book and some other work and talk, I'm sure, more about greatness. But there's a soberness to greatness that you're talking about, which is, can I look at myself honestly? Can I assess neutrally, and just see what's true, and grow and learn and adjust from there? And I think you're right that we all have obviously a ton of biases in general, including about ourselves. And some folks, I think, have biases in a positive way about themselves, right? They think highly of themselves. I'm a winner. I achieve. Some people have biases against themselves. I'm a loser. I'm a failure, right? And of course, those biases tend to prove themselves out. But I think there's a hack here you're speaking to, which is, all right, the hack is watch the tape, whatever the tape is, right? Watch the tape. Let's actually look and see what's actually going on here, so that we can assess in relationship to it and make decisions from there.
Yeah, it's the idea. I like to say it's the idea of bringing heaven to earth and making it tangible. There's one thing. My grandmother used to say, "To know better is to do better."
Mm-hmm.
I feel in a lot of places, a lot of times, and particularly in the spiritual world, the esoteric world, we accumulate so much information in our heads, but the realities of our doing, they don't equal the same. It's like we accumulate this library in our head, but our actions are so elementary.
It's really true.
Yeah. So it's an opportunity to reflect and make ourselves more accountable. And again, this is just to yourself.
Yeah.
And I think what you find is in the world, as we see the different personalities play out, we're really just doing that one thing that we know. We say it, we hear it all the time. We're just projecting. Mm-hmm. Hurt people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What's and you've been doing work. You haven't talked about your charity or anything like that, but you've been doing work with yogis.
Yes.
Right. But you've also done work with first responders, with kids in the inner city, with a lot of different communities. I'm curious as you've been doing this, what do you see as what are you trying to bring to humanity? What are you trying to bring to the people that you're in front of? What's the gift you want to offer up and say, hey, here, this is available to you?
Well, what I find though, naturally, is when I go inside, right, I do my meditation, and when I close my eyes and I go in, what I find is I can go into a point, but as I go into that point, it takes me right back out. So same amount of like energy, effort, commitment that I go into doing the internal work, I also must participate in the other existence of my life.
Yeah.
I don't just exist within, as Alan Watts says, the bag of bones.
Yeah.
I exist in the external world. The external world exists in me. And the same commitment, like I said, that I commit to evolving myself internally, it also has to evolve in my actions, my participation. So now we change the dynamic. If you want to go back to the game, humanity is the sport. Humanity is the arena. The human is the athlete.
I love that. I think because so many people I work with, they have a calling to have an impact on the world. And if we go, oh, humanity is the arena.
Yes.
I don't think I've heard it said as plainly, Keith. Humanity is the arena and humans are the athletes.
Yes.
Right. So, all right, game on.
Yes.
And then I think you got to say, what's my role? What player am I? Am I the coach? Am I where am I in that whole thing? If we use this analogy, and I think for a lot of folks that want to participate in heaven on earth, that discernment of what role am I playing, right? If this is the game and I'm a player, what part am I playing? And so for you, when you look at like where you're at, where you're going, what you've been doing, how do you consider that now? Like what role do you see yourself playing in humanity in this game?
Well, it can look like however you choose. I think one stepping stone leads you to the next. It's like when I work with people, whether it be from their health, and the first thing that they come to an awareness of is like, wow, I did that. My health changed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the next thing is, okay, what else can I do?
Mm.
So now the world really begins to be a canvas for you, and your participation can look like however you allow yourself to explore. We, in simplicity, we can just look around ourselves. We have family, we have relationships, we have a community.
Yeah.
How do I show up? How am I participating? Big or small? Because the thing is that, again, a lot of times our minds want to go to the biggest thing. But in that simplicity, in that just simple thing, like we talked about, being compassionate, loving in a great way, well, that ripples, because we have so many people around us that are admiring us for various reasons, and they learn from us. They pick up on our body language, they pick up on the words that we say. And not that we're doing it for that sense, but it's just a reality. So as we level it up, we create the space for the others around us. So naturally, it begins to level our conversations up. It begins to level our community up and how we participate with one another. It begins to be the teaching that we don't have to teach with words from a text or an institution. It begins to be the way we live our lives that suggests and speaks for us.
One of the things I always share with my folks is about becoming the living embodiment of your brand's promise, right? Whatever that quote unquote brand is. And I think there are only two ways we teach. I think it's by how we live. The example we set, the energy with which we walk through the world. Even sitting with you here right now, you have this beautiful, bright soul, this bright light, and you have this great combo of yin yang. I can feel there's still a warrior in there, right? You better believe it. But there's also this like tenderness to your heart. Yeah. And I think especially in our culture, we don't see a whole lot of examples of warriors with tender hearts, right? That's not a thing we're used to encountering. So I love you recognizing, part of how I walk through the world is the work. Yeah. And I think the other way we teach, or at least grant permission, is to the stories we tell. I think stories are one of the most powerful tools we have. And when we can share our story and walk through the world with the result of the work we put in, it's such an invitation to the people around us. Yeah. I was thinking about, speaking of this warrior, right? As a football player, you're a fighter, you're a warrior. I'm curious how you think about the relationship between fight, being a fighter, and surrender. One of the quotes you have on your website is, we have lost the concept of fighting for our health. And it made me start to think about fighting. And then, in the spiritual world, we often talk about surrender. How do those two dance together for you?
Well, I mean, it happens. There's things that we can control in the world, our lives in particular, and there's things we can't. That things go beyond our, as we say, our pay grade. Mm-hmm. It's left up to the creator.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to our power and holding our power, how is it that we're so easy to give it up?
Hmm.
How do we give someone, and again, granted, I've worked with a lot of, medical doctors, technicians, and so forth, and they have amazing insight. But I'm the only one that can ultimately diagnose myself. Now, I can hear what someone has, and they do the analysis of me, and they say, well, you're this, and this is the circumstance you're in. But now it's left up to me to realize, what is my end?
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to commit to learning about my health? Am I going to commit to realizing the fuel that it's going to take for me to rebuild, regenerate? Am I going to even give it myself a chance? That's the thing. We don't even give ourselves the chance. We don't even question, say, oh, what can I contribute? How can I contribute to my wellness? And so
Yeah.
that's what I'm suggesting. And it's not just in that perspective, it's in all aspects of our lives. How many times, like when someone says, well, you're not smart enough, you're not tall enough, you don't look attractive enough. How do we give others the right to take our power so easily?
Mm.
And I'm saying if the due diligence, the commitment, the fight is to pull whatever it is that we can conjure up, because we're going to need a certain amount of motivation,
Yeah.
inspiration inside of us, the want to, the reason, and to understand that my worth is important. Myself, I love myself, and that's the reason. That's my reasoning. And so that's going to be the motivation. That's going to be the fuel that's going to allow me to, again, step into my greatness, step into that position that I want to stand in the world as, no matter what anyone says that I am. And I hold that space because ultimately I'm the only one that can diagnose myself.
Yeah. I feel like you have a lot to share about power. And I think power is one of the most misunderstood, misused things in humanity. In fact, I think if we are going to have heaven on earth, we have to have a new relationship with power. And I think there are folks that err on the side of, I'm going to try to control everything. Yeah. Right? Where they don't go, what's above my pay grade? And they don't ask that question. And then I think there are folks who do the opposite of, all right, universe, your Calgon, take me away. But don't look and say, no, what's my part to play?
Yes.
And where do I need to be in the game?
Yes.
You brought up another piece though. Like you said, I love myself, right? Where's my motivation come from? What's my why in this? This might be a funny little question, but like, how'd you, I keep thinking about your mother.
Yes.
When you talk about loving yourself. Yes. What did your mother teach you about loving yourself, and how did you learn to love yourself?
Well, love it's so funny. I have this project that I teach called Intimacy Mastery. And one of the things when we first start the retreat, we typically do it through a retreat setting. And how we typically started, I always say that love is a figment of our imagination. First, and let's be clear in the sense of how we start this. Now, going forward, it's not saying that we can't cultivate a love, but in our cultivation of love, we have to take away all these different ideas that we've had previous, because all these our basis, our foundation of these ideas about love have all been propagandized. They've been influenced. They've been told to us, this is this and this is that. So we got to alleviate all of that. And again, going back to the film study, the biases and how we say we love ourselves and our actions that suggest something totally different, we begin to contemplate. And so with all that being said, the first staple that I began to do is create a forgiveness. It's like a rapport. It's like a lot of times I compare it to that relationship that that you're in for like years, like say it's 10 years, and then you go to a motivation speaking conference and you come back and say, okay, self, after being in a relationship with self for 10 years, over a decade, like I want to just love. And that relationship, that body, that partner is saying, well, I don't even know who you are. Uh-huh. For years, you've neglected me. For years, I've given you a sensation that I need some attention, and you not responded to me. let me go. You've put me in harm's way constantly. How am I to build a rapport or listen to trust you? See, the trust that we're talking about, that we're looking for, is a trust within ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Ourselves does not trust us. And so what I had to realize with myself, I had to go through that rapport, and I had to go, and not just with lip service, I had to create a consistency of action with me.
Yeah.
And it's not good or bad. It's not to marinate in what happened and they did me like this and this happened. No, it's to just acknowledge it. I have a formula. I like to use formulas: acknowledge, accept, and release.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we stay in it, we'll create, because humans are the greatest storytellers. and it'll be a folk tale, and we'll never get past it.
Yeah.
So we acknowledge it, and we accept it, and we release it.
Yeah.
And that's the formula. Every time it comes up, acknowledge, accept, release, and keep it going the way you want to go. And so I had to create that rapport with myself, and I had to, so naturally through a meditation, I went into yoga. I went into the yoga that I found first, which was like a yin type yoga, just a healing of just putting my body in these positions to release some of these things, this tension. Mm-hmm. I told people for thousands of times, I'm like flying in the air trying to tackle people. I've probably done that thousands of times in my life. And so my body's holding all that, And so I had to go through again, like, body, please forgive me.
Yeah.
Knees, ankles, like Yoga Nidra, like, please forgive me. And I committed to, so from a yoga, I went to nutrition. I became a vegan. It's just a lifestyle. It's progression. It keeps building, compounding. Now from a nutrition, I began to really reflect on my relationships. How can I do it better? And really put that pressure on myself, in a sense, to show and be accountable to myself in relationships, and relate and create a better person that I can be relatable to others. Again, It's the self-detox. And that self-detox is having to let go of all those ideas that linger. I even call it residue at this point. Even the residue that wants to just kind of stay with you, because it's been with you for your whole life in a lot of cases, So this new way of being is a new, like it sounds, a new way. And so these endeavors have to constantly be checked. This is why we practice.
Yeah.
This is why we practice, and we're due diligent in our practice, so we can stay sharp in our endeavors.
I love that. There's such a quality of honest reflection in so much of what you talk about. And I can say for myself, and I think for many people, like, I don't know how often we take time to do honest reflection. And so often I think we're trying to change things without assessing what's already been or where we're at, honestly, and trying to build something where there isn't a foundation that's honest, that's true, right? There's no, the word integrity keeps coming up in my mind listening to you talk. Like, there's so much about what you do that it's built on crafting a life based on integrity. Whether it's integrity with what you put in your mouth, or integrity with how you're in relationship with your body, or integrity in how you're building the relationships in your life.
Yes.
And especially for people that are here to do, big things in the world, or feel that call in their heart. If we don't have a solid foundation, it can just be trying to build on quicksand.
Yes. And Jeff, and here's the kicker with that, because sometimes people can say, well, that sounds like I'm trying to be perfect. And here, this is the other really thing I want people to think about. Well, it's not about being perfect, but it's about seeing yourself. And then when you see others in the world and you see their imperfections, by staying true to how we see ourselves and our own imperfections, we have a different compassion with others. Mm-hmm. We have a different outlook on others. Even when we relate to other people, if I fail myself 100 times, at least, well, then I don't have this microscope that I like to put on you, and you try to relate to me, and then you fall up short.
Yeah.
That's that's really how it balances itself out. You see?
Yeah.
So
It's
it's
good.
allow us to relate to society differently, because we want to have this idea of you better be perfect, knowing that I'm not perfect with myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you talk about relating to society. Let's talk a little bit about what you're up to out here, right? So being with you, you're there are certain people that are spiritual, and I don't consider that their work per se. You feel to me like a spiritual teacher that has a lot of integration here on earth, right? Heaven and earth, whether it's with the body, with food, with a relationship, whatever it is. Tell me a little bit about what you're up to in the world. So you've written this book, the Mindfulness Playbook. You have the Light It Up Foundation. Just share a little bit about what you're up to.
Yeah, I've had an opportunity to really dabble in so many spectrums with this, and I've really found a love for humans,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel that looking at society and looking at the container which we're looking to develop, whole brain thinkers or whole humans in a sense, uh, not fragmented humans, but or beings, but whole brain thinking humans. We have to reflect on the container which we're living in. And so my mission now is like I've added some things to my mission. From working with and created the Congressional Yoga Association with Congress and Senate, to a healthcare plan with the first responders and the military guys. From teaching all over the world. Like I realized that sustainable living and creating that container where people can come. I teach meditation as growth and development.
Yeah.
Really, just processing, which the breathing. When you slow down the breathing, that's allowing us to build an emotional maturity, not to react irrationally. Is to be more intent in our response. It helps develop the emotional vocabulary to learn how to articulate our feelings. Yoga is a relationship with self, putting it through the trial and error of learning how to just basically stand in the four corners of my feet. Nutrition is like, how do I feed myself? In the integrative process is how do I relate? How do I speak my feelings? How do I say I'm sorry to someone? How do I say I love you to someone? So what we need is a school of thought that's going to allow us to build that. So I have a new initiative called Kula Divide. And Kula Divide is a concept of amazing teachers that we're actually doing events all over the world. And I'm looking at some land. I've identified some land in Costa Rica. And I want to build a community there where we have sustainable living. It's like a university for the human. If you will. I feel the dynamic of creating an environment where humans can interact with one another consciously, constructively, is what we need right now. We don't really see that in the world. Conversations, I always say conversations are for building. Arguments are for winners and losers. We want to build like you're doing here with your platform. This allows us to see conversations. A lot of us are seeing conversations, maybe not your audience, but a lot of people out in the world are seeing conversations for the first time.
Yeah.
We've only seen arguments.
Right.
So it's like, so how do we know to have them? And how do we learn? It's like a yoga. How do we learn to put one foot in front of the other? Unless we do it, we have to practice it. We have to put ourselves out. So this is a great example for what you do on top of the wisdom that you have on your platform. So in this container, we like to create that. We're going to create that.
What's it called again?
Kula Divide.
Cool.
Kula. Kula Devi. Kula Divide.
Kula Divide. All right.
So Kula means group.
Got it.
And Divide is the deity. It's actually the femininity embodying the masculinity.
All right.
So it's and we's are both together.
At first I was hearing cool and divide, kind of like Cool and the Gang, but divide. And I was like, I don't really understand that. Let me check that out.
We're not that cool. I wish we were that
cool. What's it been like doing this work with Congress or first responders?
Oh, it's been great because I get to see the character that I'm so familiar with. I get to see the armor, and the same way I had an opportunity, I'm so grateful for it, to take that armor off myself is the same way I've gained by learning to do it and work with myself to work with them, the military guys. The first group that we worked with in Fort Bragg was the Green Berets, in North Carolina there. And it's so funny. They're like, "You gonna get me to meditate? Well, I'm gonna take you 15,000 feet in the air, and we're gonna jump, and let's see your meditation. And if you can do that meditation, then we'll meditate with you." And sure enough, we did it. It's just to meet them where they are.
Yeah.
And to understand that that's what it takes. I'm in.
Yep.
And it's worked for us. We were able to get Republicans and Democrats to sit and meditate together. And from my knowledge, I hadn't seen. They said we had never seen this happen before. To have these two parties to come in and sit, and we're on the Hill. We're in the Capitol, right? We're in the Hill, on the Hill, doing these types of practices. And they were like, "We've never done this before." I'm like, "Why not? It's so simple." But but to able, however we infiltrated it, I like to use that term sometimes.
Yeah, it does. It's a good term.
we get the message out, and that's what I'm so grateful to see. And it's been great,
So how, walk me through just for a minute, because a lot of folks that are in my world have visions for what they feel called to do. Oh, I'm meant to do this with people in politics or with politicians, right? But then there's the actual strategy of opening the doors, of making it happen. You were gifted. I like to think about who can we bridge to, who's willing to listen to us that might not be able to listen to the next yogi down the road, right? And so you have this credibility as a former NFL player that is, I'm sure, a big part of what's opened doors for you and been a blessing on your journey. How did the initiative come about, and how did it get actualized to actually end up on Capitol Hill with Republicans and Democrats following your breath?
It's funny. The funnier the response, I guess. Whale watching.
Whale watching. Of course. Of course.
So whale watching. So funny because it was the Saints were playing the Seattle Seahawks, and they were in the playoffs, and I think it was the second round. And I was like, my friend reached out to me, and said, "Do you want to go whale watching?" I was like, "Okay, well, I could sit here and watch this phenomenal game, or I could go whale watching." So I just paused the football game, recorded it, and took the chance to go on whale watching. Sometimes we pray for a deliverance or a sign, and we just never know. It may come by whale watching.
Yeah. Often does.
So as soon as I got there, this one particular man came to me. He's like, "I got the perfect friend for you," after he learned some of my background. And he's like, "Yeah, this person I want you to meet." And I'm like, "Okay," because I'm meeting everyone there. And some really interesting individuals there. Because I'm meeting everyone. He just keep coming with this. Okay, fine. Who's your friend? And he's like, "You just got to meet him." And I said, "We'll call him and we'll talk to him." And the irony of that, he got on the phone, Congressman Tim Ryan from Ohio.
Yeah.
So I'm on the phone with Congressman Tim Ryan, and I'm like, he starts talking about football, and he played football, and he's like, "Well, this and that. I hear you into meditation." He's talking about Kundalini yoga on the phone with me. I'm like, what kind of congressman is this?
Right.
Who's, and then he's talking about meditation. He's like, "I got to get you to come up here. We're working with the first responders. I heard you're doing some of that kind of work as well." He's like, "I want you to come up here to the Hill, to the Capitol Hill, and start and work with me on this initiative with veterans." And I was like, "Okay, I'm there. You tell me to do it, I'm there." And sure enough, we started doing it. And another congressman, wow, what is this, out of New York, out of I believe Brooklyn, no, Harlem. I forget his name right now. He reached out to me, and then Michelle Obama found out some of the things we were doing, and one thing just led to another. It's just putting yourself out there, and not in a small way. I think sometimes I think when it comes to charitable work, we don't have the same criteria that we have in our entrepreneurship or in our endeavors. I think the same precedent has to be equally in what we're calling charitable work or give back work. For the goal setting and the ideas that we want to implement, it has to be just as big, just as broad, just as bold. And so we've been initiating those things, and in the return, things like that come back. It comes back in a big way. You know, I think all contributions are amazing, obviously, but I feel when we talk about playing big, being great in that sense, I think in regards of the conscious world, we have to equally stand in that posture and that greatness and hold that voice and hold that stage like I know we can. And, and so what we'll find is the returns will be just as big, you know?
I love it. And amen to that. You're preaching.
Yeah.
You know, my whole life, anything that's happened that's been like really just cool, amazing, you know, has almost always come from whale watching, right? Or some version of it, right? Where it's like you get this nudge, like, okay, I'm supposed to go. I don't know why. I don't know who I'm going to meet. I don't know what's going to be there. Maybe nothing. But okay, I'll go. And that, you know, I think of that as like partnership with the universe, right? It makes an invitation. Hey, you want to dance? Right. But then you got to step onto the dance floor with it, you know? And I love whale watching. Of course, whale watching. That's how the universe always works.
Yeah. Let me give you another example. In the city of Los Angeles, I wanted to, one of the first retreats I went to, it just blew me away. And I was like, what if we could create a retreat for the city of Los Angeles? And I had a meeting set up, one of my relationships set a meeting up with the CEO of Ultimed, and they employ over 700 doctors around the city of Los Angeles, actually California. They're pretty big, Ultimed. They provide healthcare for the inner city. And I was like, I want to do and create a retreat for the city of Los Angeles. And I was telling them my ideas, which led me to the city council there in LA. I was like, I would like for you to donate me the LA Coliseum, you know?
And for folks who aren't from LA, the Coliseum seats thousands and thousands of people. I mean, it's where big games are played.
Yes, USC, right? It's our home games there.
Yeah. So we're not talking about just like a little hall. This is a arena.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like,
please donate an arena.
And we'll match it. We'll put some funds. We'll organize some funds together. I got the CEO of Ultimate, and this is what we want to do together for the city of Los Angeles: a run walk concept. We call it the Mindful 5K Expo, and just getting people in community with one another to enjoy the day in a container such as the LA Coliseum. And we had 12,000 people come to our first one. We raised over $750,000 for that event. And we divvied up the funds to give it to the local organizations throughout the city that participated with us there. Things like that, you know? It's just thinking like outside the box.
Yeah. Allowing the vision to really expand.
Yes.
I think so many of us, the reason we play small is we don't think big.
Yes.
Right? Like, if we can think big, then the creative juices start to flow of how could this happen? One of the things my guidance always says is that all creative ideas have a life force to them, and that all resources necessary for the full fruition of that creative idea are connected to the life force of that idea. They're not connected to us, right? but they are connected to where is the energy, what feels true, what wants to happen that I can partner with, and then amazing things can occur. Okay, we could, hell, I could keep talking with you for hours and hours, but I do just want to ask you this before we close. A real passion of mine working with people is about helping them to discern that spiritual voice, their inner guidance, their gut, God, however you want to name it, to use it in terms of guiding where they're going in life and what they're called to do, to partner with it, even when the message seems left to center, like go whale watching, right? Okay, I'll go whale watching, sure, right? How have you cultivated that? Like, how do you experience that? How do you dance with that energy? What do you name it? Yeah, share a little bit about that.
Well, I say intuition is a superpower. It's a superpower that we have, and again, we've tapped into it, in my opinion, very limited. And the trust factor comes into implementing that intuition and putting it to use. Meaning, if you're led to speak something, speak it. If you're led to do something, initiative, whatever it is, put it out there. I always say that when you hear that little voice on the shoulder that says, "Don't do that," do the opposite of that.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't work for you, we even have another dynamic on top of that, and it's a codified way of living. One of my teachers has this dynamic that I put and make it a principle of my life is, what do I desire? First putting that staple out, and then why do I desire it? How do I plan to create what I desire? How do I plan to do what I desire, rather, or however you want to frame it? And then what is the constructive value of me doing so?
I love that last question in particular.
Of my life, when I can apply that, I'm creating that high vibration. I'm living that frequency. I'm living that frequency more times than I'm living less than that frequency. Because again, we're not teaching perfection. We don't have that, unfortunately, that availability to be perfect as humans. We're flawed naturally. But however, the majority of my life, I'm holding that space. I'm creating that space. And over time, it just begins to be the lifestyle. I'd say practice becomes the habit, and habit becomes the way we live.
Awesome. Keith Mitchell, you're a joy. Thank you for being on this planet. Thanks for showing up, man.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure being here with you, man.
How do we find out more about you?
Well, my website, keithmitchell59.com. My Instagram, I think those two are the best way, keithmitchell59. All the latest things that we have coming up. We got Intimacy Mastery 2 is coming up in Tulum, July 31st through August 4th. We have a dinner in the jungle. If anybody's in Mexico, Playa del Carmen, Tulum area, we're going to do a full moon dinner in the jungle. It's going to be pretty amazing. So I'd love for you to tune into that. And all those updates will be on those various platforms. Awesome.
KeithMitchell5959.com, KeithMitchell59 on Insta. Hey, let's stay in touch. I want to have you back sometime. Thank you for being here.
Hey there, thanks so much for listening in. If this conversation was powerful, if it stirred your soul or inspired your journey, then be sure to share it with a friend. Just copy and paste the link wherever you're listening to this podcast and text that link right now to a friend that you think would be inspired by this episode. And if this is your first time here, be sure to click that subscribe button over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and I'd really appreciate it if you'd leave a rating and review so I can get to know you and your thoughts better. To learn more about the work I do with emerging and established paradigm changers, go to thecourageousmessenger.com. That's all for today. Thanks so much for being here, and I hope to see you in the next episode.